Imagine driving home after a brutal 16-hour shift, barely making enough to keep the lights on. It's pouring rain, and you're exhausted. Then you see him, a soaking wet homeless man, huddled under his store awning. Most people would drive by. Most people do. But Diego Alvarez isn't most people. He stops, offers a free ride, shows a small kindness that seems insignificant in the moment. He couldn't know that this simple act would plunge him into a dangerous web of corruption, revenge, and justice years in the making. He couldn't know that the disheveled man in his back seat was actually a former millionaire executive who'd spent years gathering evidence against one of the most powerful men in the city. He couldn't know that within hours, FBI agents would be pounding on his door, that his fingerprint would unlock secrets powerful enough to topple an empire, that the man who once fired him would soon be coming after him with everything he had. One ride, one choice, one moment of kindness about to change everything. The remarkable true story starts now. Rain pounded on the windshield of Diego Alvarez's taxi, the wipers fighting a losing battle against the downpour. The digital clock on his dashboard read 2:17 a.m., and the illuminated off-duty sign reflected in the puddles that had formed on the city streets. Diego rubbed his tired eyes, the weariness of a 16-hour shift settling deep in his bones. Last fare of the night, he muttered to himself, counting the crumpled bills in his hand. Not even enough to cover Luis's medicine this month. At 38, Diego's face carried more worry lines than his father had at 60. The taxi company had cut commissions again, his son's medical bills were piling up, and the rent on his small apartment was already 2 weeks overdue. He tucked the money into his wallet and pulled away from the curb, eager to get home for a few hours of sleep before starting it all over again. The streets of the city were nearly empty, save for the occasional late-night reveler stumbling out of a bar. Diego turned onto Westlake Avenue, taking the route that would get him home quickest. The rain intensified, sheets of water cascading down his windshield. Through the blur, he almost missed the figure huddled under the awning of a closed convenience store. An old man stood pressed against the wall, soaked despite the minimal shelter. His gray beard was matted to his chest, and he clutched a tattered backpack protectively. Diego felt a pang in his chest. The man reminded him of his late uncle, who had fallen on hard times after the factory closures in '08. Diego slowed his taxi, the yellow light illuminating the man's weathered face. The smart move would be to keep driving. He was off-duty, exhausted, and every mile driven was gas money he couldn't spare. Just keep going, Diego told himself, but his hands betrayed him as he pulled the taxi to the curb. He rolled down the passenger window. "Hey, you need a ride somewhere." The man looked up, suspicious eyes peering from beneath a soaked baseball cap. "No money," he said, his voice gravelly from disuse or perhaps years of hard living. "It's okay," Diego replied, instantly regretting the words even as they left his mouth. "I'm heading home. I can drop you at a shelter on the way." The man hesitated, looking at the taxi and then up at the relentless sky. After a moment, he nodded and shuffled toward the car. "Name's Diego," he said as the man climbed into the back seat, bringing with him the smell of rain and days without a shower. "Frankie," the man replied after a pause so long Diego thought he might not answer at all. "Frankie Doyle." Diego pulled back into the empty street. "I know the shelter on 3rd is open all night. That work for you?" Frankie shifted in his seat, clutching his backpack tighter. "Yeah, 3rd is good. Thanks for stopping. Most people don't even look at me anymore. Like I'm already a ghost." Diego caught Frankie's eye in the rearview mirror. Despite the man's disheveled appearance, there was a clarity and intelligence in his gaze that caught Diego off guard. "Been on the streets long?" Diego asked, immediately wondering if he'd overstepped. Frankie let out a dry chuckle. "Long enough to see how the world really works. How the people at the top stay there by stepping on everybody else." Diego nodded. He knew something about that. 3 years ago, he'd been driving for a better company, benefits, steady clients, even a 401k. Then came the incident with Victor Harlow, the real estate developer who'd refused to pay his fare and called Diego disposable when he'd objected. One complaint to the company from a man like Harlow was all it took. Diego was out of a job the next day. "I know what you mean," Diego said. "Systems rigged." "More than you know, son," Frankie replied, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. "But sometimes karma takes its sweet time. I've waited years for mine." The rain drummed on the roof of the taxi as they sat at a red light, The streets deserted enough that Diego considered running it. "You live around here?" Diego asked, trying to keep the conversation going. "I live wherever I can," Frankie said. "Been watching this city change. Been watching certain people rise while pushing others down. Been waiting for the right moment." Diego raised an eyebrow. "Right moment for what?" Frankie stared out the window, his reflection ghostly against the dark glass. "To make things right. Some dangerous people think they've buried their secrets deep enough. They forget that the desperate man with nothing left to lose is the most dangerous of all." A chill that had nothing to do with the rain ran down Diego's spine. He gripped the steering wheel tighter, suddenly wondering if picking up this man had been a mistake. "You're not planning to hurt anyone, are you?" Diego asked cautiously. Frankie's eyes met his in the mirror again, and a small smile creased his weathered face. "No, son. I don't hurt people. I expose them. Truth is my only weapon now." They drove in silence for a few blocks, the windshield wipers keeping time like a metronome. Diego relaxed slightly. Frankie was probably just another man broken by life, full of big talk about justice that would never come. "Mind if we take a detour?" Frankie asked suddenly. "There's somewhere I'd like to see before you drop me off." Diego checked the time. He should say no. He needed sleep, and every minute on the road was burning gas he couldn't afford to waste. "Where to?" he heard himself ask. "Harlow Tower," Frankie replied. Diego's hands tightened on the wheel. "Harlow?" "As in Victor Harlow." Frankie leaned forward, his sudden intensity filling the cab. "You know him. He got me fired from my last job," Diego said bitterly. "Called me disposable when I asked him to pay his fare. One phone call from him, and I was on the street." A strange look passed over Frankie's face, part surprise, part satisfaction, as though puzzle pieces were falling into place. "Seems like you and I have something in common," Frankie said. "Harlow destroys lives and never looks back." Diego made a left turn, heading downtown where the gleaming Harlow Tower stood as the newest addition to the city's skyline. "What's your beef with Harlow?" Diego asked. Frankie sat back, shadows playing across his face with each passing streetlight. "Let's just say he took everything from me. My career, my reputation, my family." He paused, looking down at his dirty hands. "My dignity. And what? You're going to get revenge by looking at his building in the rain." Frankie chuckled, but there was no humor in it. "No, Dago. I'm going to bring him down with the truth he thought he buried. All these years living like this weren't just bad luck. I chose to disappear. Chose to watch and wait and gather what I needed." They approached downtown, the skyscrapers looming through the rain. Harlow Tower stood tallest among them, its illuminated sign a beacon of wealth and power. "Stop here," Frankie said as they came within view of the tower. Diego pulled over. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, and Frankie rolled down his window, staring up at the building with an intensity that made Diego uncomfortable. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Frankie said quietly. "Built on lies, fraud, and stolen dreams. But beautiful. Look, man, I don't know what you're planning." "Nothing tonight," Frankie interrupted. "But soon. Very soon." He turned to Diego, his eyes clear and focused. "You seem like a good man, Diego. A man who does the right thing even when it costs him. That's rare these days." Diego shifted uncomfortably under Frankie's gaze. "I just offered you a ride, and that small kindness might change everything," Frankie replied cryptically. "Let's head to the shelter now. I've seen what I needed to see." As they pulled away from Harlow Tower, Diego couldn't shake the feeling that this strange encounter meant something, that his decision to help a homeless man might somehow be more significant than he realized. The shelter on 3rd Street was a converted warehouse, its lights a dim beacon in the wet night. Diego pulled up to the entrance where security guards stood watching them suspiciously. "Thanks for the ride, Diego Alvarez," Frankie said, reaching for the door handle. Diego frowned. "How do you know my last name?" Frankie smiled. "Your taxi license on the dashboard." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wrapped object about the size of a matchbox. "Hold on to this for me, would you? Just for a day or two." Before Diego could object, Frankie had placed the small package in the center console and was climbing out of the taxi. "What is that?" "Hey, wait," Diego called, but Frankie was already walking away, his hunched figure disappearing through the shelter doors. Diego looked down at the small package, wrapped in what appeared to be wax paper and secured with rubber bands. He picked it up, surprisingly heavy for its size. He should throw it away. He didn't need trouble, especially not from a strange homeless man with cryptic warnings and an obsession with Victor Harlow. Instead, he slipped it into his jacket pocket and put the taxi in drive. Whatever Frankie's story was, it wasn't his problem. He had enough of his own. As Diego pulled away from the curb, he didn't notice the black sedan parked half a block down or the man inside taking photos of his taxi's license plate. By the time Diego reached his small apartment, the first hints of dawn were lightening the sky. He trudged up the 3 flights of stairs, his legs heavy with exhaustion. Inside, he checked on his sleeping son before collapsing onto his bed, not even bothering to remove his shoes. His last thought before sleep claimed him was of Frankie's intense gaze as he stared up at Harlow Tower. To make things right, he had said. Diego wondered what that meant, but exhaustion pulled him under before he could dwell on it further. He couldn't have known that in just a few hours, the FBI would be knocking at his door, or that the small package in his jacket pocket would change his life forever. The pounding on Diego's door jolted him awake. Disoriented, he squinted at his bedside clock, 9:47 a.m. He'd barely been asleep for 3 hours. Police. Open up, Mr. Alvarez. The voice on the other side of the door was authoritative, urgent. Diego's heart hammered in his chest as he stumbled to his feet. Luis. His first thought was for his 10-year-old son. He rushed to Luis's room, finding him sitting up in bed, eyes wide with fear. Stay here, Diego whispered, trying to keep his voice steady. Everything's fine. The pounding came again. Mr. Alvarez. FBI. We need you to open this door now. FBI? The words sent ice through Diego's veins. He had no idea what they could want with him, but experience had taught him that encounters with law enforcement rarely ended well for people like him. Coming, he called, quickly pulling on the shirt he'd discarded hours earlier. He approached the door cautiously, then took a deep breath and opened it. 3 men stood in the hallway. 2 wore dark suits with the unmistakable bulge of shoulder holsters beneath their jackets. The third, standing slightly in front, was tall with a closely cropped beard and piercing eyes that missed nothing as they scanned Diego's face. Diego Alvarez? The bearded man asked, flashing a badge. Special Agent Thomas Reed, FBI. These are Agents Cooper and Diaz. We need to speak with you immediately. Diego swallowed hard, his mouth suddenly dry. What's this about? Reed's expression remained impassive. May we come in? This isn't a conversation for your hallway. Diego reluctantly stepped aside. As the agents entered his small apartment, he was acutely aware of the peeling paint, the second-hand furniture, the visible signs of his financial struggles. Dad. Luis's small voice came from the bedroom doorway. What's happening? Nothing, Mijo, Diego said quickly. These men just need to ask me some questions. Go back to your room, okay? I'll make breakfast soon. Luis hesitated, his eyes darting suspiciously between the agents before retreating back into his bedroom. Agent Reed sat on Diego's worn couch without waiting for an invitation. Mr. Alvarez, where were you between the hours of 2 and 3 a.m. this morning? Diego's mind raced. I was working. Driving my taxi. Why? And did you pick up any passengers during this time? Reed continued, ignoring Diego's question. The memory of Frankie Doyle flashed in Diego's mind. The rain, the strange conversation, the small package. The package. Diego's eyes involuntarily darted to his jacket hanging by the door, where Frankie's mysterious gift still sat in the pocket. Agent Reed didn't miss the glance. Mr. Alvarez, did you pick up a passenger named Francis Blackwood, also known as Frankie Doyle? Diego felt the blood drain from his face. I gave a ride to a homeless man who called himself Frankie. I dropped him at the shelter on 3rd. He didn't pay or anything. I was off duty and just trying to help him out of the rain. Reed exchanged glances with the other agents. And did this man give you anything? Did he ask you to hold on to any item for him? Diego's palms began to sweat. Whatever was in that package, it was clearly important enough for the FBI to track him down within hours. He might have. A small package. I didn't think much of it. Where is it now? Reed's voice was sharp, urgent. Diego gestured toward his jacket. In my coat pocket. I haven't even looked at what it is. Reed nodded to Agent Diaz, who immediately moved to the jacket and carefully extracted the package. He brought it back to Reed, who examined it without opening it. Mr. Alvarez, the man you drove last night is not just a homeless person. His real name is Francis Blackwood. Until 8 years ago, he was the chief financial officer of Synergex Holdings. Reed's eyes locked with Diego's. Does that name mean anything to you? Diego shook his head. Synergex was a major financial services company that collapsed in 2017 after a massive fraud was uncovered. Hundreds of people lost their jobs. Thousands of investors lost their savings. Francis Blackwood was blamed, charged with orchestrating the entire scheme. Diego sank into a chair across from Reed. And you're saying this homeless guy I picked up was this executive? Yes. But there's more to the story, Reed continued. Blackwood disappeared before he could stand trial. Most assumed he'd fled the country with hidden funds. Some thought he might be dead. Reed placed the package on the coffee table between them. We now have reason to believe that Blackwood was framed for the Synergex collapse and that the real architect of the fraud was his business partner, Victor Harlow. Diego's head snapped up at the mention of Harlow's name. Harlow? The real estate developer? Reed raised an eyebrow. You know him. He got me fired from my previous job, Diego said bitterly. He refused to pay his fare, and when I insisted, he called my company and had me terminated. Called me disposable. Reed nodded slowly. Victor Harlow has a reputation for such behavior. But what we're investigating goes far beyond petty cruelty. We believe Harlow systematically looted Synergex, created false records implicating Blackwood, and then used the stolen funds to launch his real estate empire. Diego's mind was reeling. And Blackwood, he told you this? No, Reed replied. Blackwood has been off our radar for years. But 6 months ago, we received an anonymous tip with evidence suggesting Harlow's guilt. We've been building a case, but we needed more. Then last night, our surveillance on Harlow picked up an unusual signal. Someone accessed a dormant server once used by Synergex. The access came from a device registered to Francis Blackwood. And you think this device is in the package? Diego asked, staring at the wrapped object on his table. Reed nodded. We believe so. But what we don't understand is why Blackwood would give it to you, a random taxi driver. Diego remembered Frankie's words. You seem like a good man, Diego. A man who does the right thing even when it costs him. He also recalled the strange coincidence of their shared history with Harlow. Maybe not so random, Diego said slowly. He asked me to drive by Harlow Tower. When I mentioned that Harlow had got me fired, he seemed, almost pleased. Like it confirmed something for him. Reed leaned forward. He specifically asked about Harlow? No, he brought up Harlow first. Asked to see the tower. When I told him my story, he said we had something in common, that Harlow had destroyed his life too. Diego paused, remembering more details of their conversation. He said he'd been watching and waiting, gathering what he needed. That he was going to expose someone with the truth. Agent Cooper, who had been silent until now, spoke up. Sir, this matches the profile. Blackwood has been planning this for years. Reed nodded thoughtfully. Mr. Alvarez, do you mind if we open this package? Diego gestured for them to proceed. It's not mine anyway. Reed carefully removed the rubber bands and unwrapped the wax paper. Inside was a small metal object that looked like a cross between a flash drive and a medallion. It had an unusual port on one end and what appeared to be a small fingerprint sensor on its surface. It's an encrypted drive, Reed explained. Military grade. The data can only be accessed with the correct fingerprint and passcode. So you need Blackwood, to open it? Diego asked. Reed's expression darkened. That's the problem, Mr. Alvarez. Francis Blackwood was found dead this morning at the shelter on 3rd Street. Heart failure, apparently natural causes. Diego felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. The weathered man from his taxi, with his intense eyes and cryptic words, dead, just hours after their encounter. I can't believe it. His timing was deliberate, Reed continued. According to the shelter staff, he'd been staying there on and off for months. We believe he knew his health was failing and decided to make his move before it was too late. But without him, how will you unlock the drive? Diego asked. A small smile crossed Reed's face. That's where you come in, Mr. Alvarez. Before his death, Blackwood sent us one final anonymous message. It said, the key is in the hands of a good man, a taxi driver who was wronged by Harlow, just as I was. The fingerprint is his. Diego stared at the device in disbelief. Mine? Why would my fingerprint work on his security device? We don't know yet, Reed admitted. But Blackwood clearly trusted you for some reason. He must have programmed the device to accept your print. Diego shook his head, trying to process this bizarre turn of events. This is crazy. I just gave the guy a ride. Sometimes that's all it takes, Reed said. One small act of kindness to the right person at the right time. He held out the device. Would you be willing to try? Diego hesitated, then slowly reached for the device. As his thumb touched the sensor, a small light turned from red to green, and the device emitted a soft beep. It worked, Diego whispered. Reed's eyes widened slightly, the first real emotion he'd shown. Now we need the passcode. Did Blackwood say anything else to you? Anything that might be a clue? Diego closed his eyes, trying to recall every detail of his conversation with Frankie. He talked about karma taking its time, about dangerous people thinking they'd buried their secrets, about making things right. Reed nodded encouragingly. Anything specific? A phrase, a date, a number? Diego shook his head, then suddenly remembered. Wait, when I dropped him off, he called me by my full name. I asked how he knew my last name, and he said he saw it on my taxi license. But Diego frowned. My license only shows D. Alvarez. He specifically said Diego Alvarez. Reed exchanged glances with his colleagues. He already knew who you were before he got into your taxi. You weren't random at all. But why me? Diego asked, the weight of the situation finally hitting him fully. I'm nobody. To Blackwood, you were somebody, Reed replied. Somebody who'd also been wronged by Harlow. Somebody he could trust with his final act of justice. He pointed to the device. There should be a keypad or some way to enter a code. Diego examined the device and found a small touch screen that had activated when his fingerprint was accepted. It displayed a prompt for a 6-digit code. Any ideas? Reed asked. Diego thought hard. He mentioned waiting years for karma. Could it be a date? Maybe when Harlow ruined him. The Synergex collapse was discovered on September 17, 2017, Agent Cooper offered. Try 091717. Diego carefully entered the numbers, but the screen flashed red. What about when he wronged you? Reed suggested. When did Harlow get you fired? April 23, 2022, Diego replied. 042322. He entered the numbers, and again the screen flashed red. Wait, Diego said, a realization dawning. What if it's not about when we were wronged, but about when justice comes? Today's date? He entered 042025, April 20th, 2025, and the screen turned green. The device hummed to life, and a holographic projection appeared above it, displaying file directories and documents. My God, Reed breathed, leaning forward. Financial records, offshore accounts, recorded conversations, falsified documents. This is everything we need to bring Harlow down. As the agents pored over the projected files, Diego watched in stunned silence. His simple act of kindness, giving a free ride to a homeless man, had somehow made him central to what appeared to be a major federal case against one of the city's most powerful men. Mr. Alvarez, Reed said finally, looking up from the device. This evidence is extraordinary. Blackwood spent years gathering it, documenting every aspect of Harlow's fraud. But there's something else here, too. He pointed to a particular file. Records of Harlow's continued criminal activities, blackmail, bribery, tax evasion, even evidence suggesting he's using his real estate projects to launder money for organized crime. And Frankie Blackwood gave all this to me? Why not just send it directly to you? Diego asked. Blackwood didn't trust authorities, Reed explained. After being framed, he likely feared corruption might bury his evidence. By giving it to you, a civilian with a personal grievance against Harlow, he ensured the evidence would reach us through a channel Harlow couldn't control or anticipate. What happens now? Diego asked. Reed's expression hardened with determination. Now, Mr. Alvarez, we build a case that will bring Victor Harlow's empire crashing down. And we'd like your help to do it. From his bedroom doorway, Luis watched with wide eyes as his father nodded in agreement. Neither of them could have imagined that a simple act of compassion on a rainy night would set in motion events that would topple one of the most powerful men in the city and change their lives forever. Unknown to any of them, across town in his penthouse office atop Harlow Tower, Victor Harlow was reviewing security footage from the previous night, freezing on the frame showing Diego's taxi parked outside his building. Harlow's face contorted with rage as he zoomed in on the grainy image of a bearded passenger in the back seat, a ghost from his past he'd thought long buried. "Find that taxi driver," he snarled into his phone. "Find him now." But it was already too late. The wheels of karma, set in motion by a simple act of kindness, were already turning, and this time they would not be stopped. The next 72 hours passed in a blur for Diego. His small apartment became an impromptu FBI command center as Agent Reed and his team worked tirelessly to analyze Blackwood's evidence. Diego had taken emergency leave from the taxi company, citing a family situation. It wasn't entirely a lie. His family's safety was now his primary concern. "We're moving you and Luis to a secure location tonight," Reed told him on the third morning, his voice low as they sat at Diego's kitchen table. "Harlow's people have been asking questions about you all over the city." Diego glanced toward the bedroom where Luis was packing a small bag. "How did they even find out about me?" "Security footage from Harlow Tower showed your taxi," Reed explained. "We underestimated how quickly Harlow would connect the dots. He's desperate, and that makes him dangerous." A knock at the door made both men tense. Agent Cooper answered it, hand hovering near his weapon, then relaxed. "It's the tech team with the updates, sir." A young agent entered with a tablet and placed it in front of Reed. "Sir, we've completed the financial trace. The evidence is conclusive. Harlow didn't just steal from Synergex. He's been running a massive laundering operation through his real estate developments for years." Reed nodded grimly. "And the mayoral campaign accounts. Illegal contributions, sir. Millions funneled from offshore accounts tied to known criminal organizations." Diego listened in disbelief. Victor Harlow, the city's celebrated visionary developer who was now running for mayor, was not just a corporate fraud but in bed with organized crime. "We move on him tonight," Reed decided. "His campaign is holding a major fundraiser at the Grand Hotel. Every power player in the city will be there." Diego's phone buzzed with a text message. He checked it and felt his blood freeze. "It's from my boss at the taxi company. I've been fired." He showed Reed the message. "Services no longer required. Return company property immediately." Reed's expression darkened. "Harlow's influence at work. He's trying to pressure you." Another text came through, this time from an unknown number. Diego read it aloud. "Things don't have to get worse. Return what doesn't belong to you. Last chance. Direct threat," Reed noted, taking the phone. "That seals it. We're moving you now, not tonight." As agents quickly gathered their equipment, Diego went to check on Luis. The boy sat on his bed, a small backpack beside him, looking smaller than his 10 years. "Are we in trouble, Dad?" he asked quietly. Diego sat beside him, arm around his shoulders. "No, Mijo. Sometimes doing the right thing gets complicated, that's all. We're helping make something wrong become right again." "Because of the homeless man?" Diego nodded. "He was a good person who lost everything because of a bad man's lies. Now we're helping him get justice." Luis considered this, then squared his small shoulders. "Like in my comic books. The hero always gets justice in the end." Diego smiled, throat tight with emotion. "Exactly like that." As they prepared to leave, Agent Reed received an urgent call. Diego watched Reed's expression shift from concern to grim satisfaction. "Change of plans," Reed announced. "Our surveillance team reports Harlow is not at his office or penthouse. He's making an unscheduled appearance at Channel 8 News for an emergency interview." "Why would he do that?" Diego asked. "He's panicking," Reed replied. "Our sources say he's planning to announce his withdrawal from the mayoral race, citing personal reasons. He's trying to disappear before we can build our case." A determined smile crossed Reed's face. But he's too late. 2 hours later, Diego and Luis sat in a secure FBI location, watching events unfold on television. The Channel 8 studio had been transformed into an arrest scene, broadcast live to the entire city. Victor Harlow, immaculate in his tailored suit, expression incredulous, was being led away in handcuffs. Victor Harlow is being charged with multiple counts of fraud, money laundering, tax evasion, and obstruction of justice, the stunned news anchor reported. The FBI states that the arrest follows the discovery of substantial evidence provided by the late Francis Blackwood, the former CFO of Synergex Holdings who was previously believed to have orchestrated the company's collapse. The camera panned to Agent Reed, making a brief statement. Today's arrest is the result of years of meticulous evidence gathering by Mr. Blackwood, who spent the final years of his life documenting Mr. Harlow's crimes while living on our city streets. This case underscores that justice, while sometimes delayed, eventually finds its way to the truth. Luis gripped Diego's hand. The homeless man was a hero after all, he whispered. Yes, Diego agreed softly. He was. 3 months later, Diego stood outside the courthouse as Victor Harlow's sentencing was announced. The man who had once seemed untouchable, who had ruined lives without consequence, had been sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. His assets were being liquidated, with the proceeds directed toward restitution for his victims, including the former employees of Synergex. Agent Reed approached Diego on the courthouse steps. You and Luis can return home now. It's over. What about Harlow's associates? The criminal organizations? Diego asked. We're working through them one by one, Reed assured him. Harlow gave up a lot of names to try for a reduced sentence. Diego nodded. Justice was working its way through the system, slow but certain. There's something else, Reed added, handing Diego an envelope. As the person who delivered Blackwood's evidence, you're entitled to the FBI's whistleblower reward. It's substantial. Diego opened the envelope and stared at the figure on the check inside. It was more money than he'd ever seen, enough to pay off his debts, cover Luis's medical expenses, and still have a comfortable cushion. Blackwood would have wanted you to have it, Reed said. After all, if you hadn't stopped for him that night, none of this would have happened. Diego thought about the twist of fate that had led him to pick up a soaking wet homeless man on a rainy night. One small act of kindness that had cascaded into justice for hundreds of victims. What will you do now? Reed asked. Diego smiled, his mind already made up. Start my own taxi company. Fair rates, decent wages for the drivers. And once a week, free rides for anyone who needs help getting to shelters or job interviews. Reed nodded his approval. Blackwood would have liked that. 6 months to the day after Francis Blackwood's death, Diego's new taxi company, Second Chance Transportation, launched with 5 cars and 10 drivers, all former employees from companies Harlow had destroyed. And on that same rainy evening, in a twist of poetic justice, a desperate figure huddled at a bus stop caught Diego's attention. Hair now gray, designer suit replaced with discount store clothes. Victor Harlow's former attorney, disbarred and disgraced by his connection to the scandal, was trying unsuccessfully to hail passing taxis. Diego pulled over, rolled down his window, and looked at the man who had once helped victimize so many. Need a ride? He asked. The man looked up, not recognizing Diego. I can't pay much, he admitted shamefully. Diego smiled. It's your lucky day. Thursday nights are our Fresh Start program, free rides for those who need a second chance. Hop in. As they drove through the rainy streets, Diego glanced in his rearview mirror at his passenger. The wheel had turned full circle. Karma had completed its journey. Somewhere, he was certain, Francis Blackwood was smiling.